Litigation is about to become the #1 business in the Big Easy. Victims of Hurricane Katrina are about to file a flood of suits. Joining us now to look at the New Orleans legal open season is Randall Smith, partner at Smith and Fawer of New Orleans, Gladstone Jones III, partner at Jones, Veras and Freiberg, and Lanny Edwards, chairman and managing partner of Lemley and Kelleher. He joins us from where he has had to relocate in Shreveport, and the others are out of New Orleans as well. Gentlemen, welcome. Good to have you all here. Lanny, let me begin with you. You say that litigation is going to take on a new importance in the region. Explain.
Well, unfortunately, I fear that litigation will now be the #1 industry in Louisiana for the foreseeable future, and probably would be as of we speak if many of the appropriate courthouses weren't still under 14 feet of water.
Randall Smith, what do you think? You agree with what Lanny just said?
No, I really don't. I think construction is going to be the #1 industry in New Orleans, and the rebuilding of New Orleans, that's everyone's top priority right now.
But do you have any question, Mr. Smith, that there won't be a lot of lawsuits filed as a result of what's happened here?
I think there will be lawsuits. Some are going to be necessary, some may be unnecessary. I think the focus of most people is getting their lives back together. I think that there are going to be disputes, obviously, between landlords and tenants. There are going to be contract disputes. There are, of course, going to be disputes between people within insurance companies. And there are probably going to be some attempts to cast a wide net of blame on city, state, or federal government. Whether those efforts really pan out or involve that many people, we'll see.
Mr. Jones, one area of litigation that Mr. Smith didn't mention, but I suspect may well come into play, would be those involving environmental cleanup and contamination of various areas, fields, and so forth. Is that a possibility?
I think that that's most definitely a possibility. My understanding, while I'm out in Houston, Texas, trying to get my office together, but my understanding is that the environmental impacts in the city of New Orleans are enormous. From the levee breaks and the lake pouring into the city. I think there's no question that there's going to be some litigation involving the environmental contamination issues. No question about it.
Let me turn back to you, Lanny Edwards, and ask whether it is justifiable for there likely to be wrongful death lawsuits filed against hospitals, nursing homes, even the city and the state in Louisiana.
Well, Tyler, I unfortunately again believe that that is likely to be the case, that there will be suits against any health provider in which there has been a death or injury, and they in turn will probably try to take action against the city and the state, looking, for example, at the loss of generators in hospitals that may have incurred that problem once before. Looking at how people were treated, the issue of injuries from evacuation alone, and how they were treated in triage, or more appropriately, not treated early on because of failure of proper coordination between governments and private contractors.
Mr. Jones, if you wanted to file a lawsuit, where would you go to file it?
Well, I don't know that you could file it today. I understand that the Orleans Parish Courts are going to be opening back up at an undetermined location right now, but the statute of limitations in the rest of the country prescription for us in Louisiana has, as I understand it, been suspended. So I think that the courthouse, when they do open, there will be some lawsuits, and I think that there will be some important lawsuits. Some of these injuries and deaths that have been caused as a result of some of these nursing homes not being evacuated, you can most certainly count on lawsuits happening there. I think that the big litigation that we're about to see in New Orleans, rightly or wrongly, is going to be over the federal, state, and local governmental officials' reaction to what happened here. Certainly there was a catastrophe with the hurricane, but there was a catastrophe of enormous proportions with regard to the response effort. There was a plan in place. The city knew it, the state knew it, the federal government knew it, and for 4.5 days, victims sat out there by the convention center in the Superdome for the world to see in a terrible condition. And I would almost, I'm fairly comfortable that litigation will be filed with regard to that.
Mr. Smith, can you sue the federal government and win?
You can sue the federal government. There is a discretionary function exemption for them. In other words, if the federal government has the discretion to handle a particular problem and is within that discretion, that's fine. But if they're negligent in doing something they're required to do, such as mandated by Congress, then there is liability. And I think everyone's going to be looking at FEMA in particular and other aspects. You know, the issues are still panning out as to exactly what caused so much of the problem in New Orleans.
Let's go I'm sorry, finish your thought there, I'm sorry.
Yeah, as we know, it wasn't so much just the hurricane itself. It's what happened with regard to the levees. There are a lot of issues out there, and I think we're all looking at those.
Let me go 1, 2, 3 through the panel, beginning with you, Mr. Smith, since I'm still talking to you, and ask whether you have had clients come to you and either ask you to file lawsuits in connection with Katrina, or whether you have done so. Have you, yes or no?
We haven't filed any yet. We've had people definitely talking to us about it, asking us to look into it. All kinds of people. We represent a lot of business owners and people of all economic backgrounds, and everyone's been affected by this, and everyone's looking and wanting to make sure to preserve all their options.
Mr. Jones, how about you?
I agree. We have been contacted by a number of hotel owners. We've been contacted by a number of the people at the convention center, a number of people at the Superdome. But I think what Randy said was very important. The people from New Orleans right now are trying to look forward. We're trying to put our lives back together. I know that a third of my staff is now homeless, looking for a place to go. Everything they own in the world is destroyed. New Orleans lawyers are not looking today to start filing lawsuits. We really do want to zero in on the cause of the mass chaos in New Orleans that we saw on day 2, 3, and 4. We know that there are going to be run-of-the-mill insurance claims. There's going to be a big debate about flood versus wind insurance and homeowners policy. But what I'm really anticipating, and what I think could be pretty ugly over the course of the next 2 years or 3 years, is this litigation that touches on these important social issues as to why this debacle occurred. Why did this delay occur? What are going to happen to these children around the country that are having to be educated in evacuee facilities as opposed to schools? These are going to raise important topics, and I would anticipate that they're soon to be coming down the pike.
Lanny Edwards, excuse me. Have you filed any lawsuits, or have your clients come to you in anticipation of doing so?
We haven't filed any lawsuits at this point. I'm Mr. Jones, who I've seen on the other side of many lawsuits, has made 2 impassionate jury speeches in this brief interview. I'm usually on the other side of him, but we've had innumerable clients, business clients and individuals who have insurance coverage issues as to whether they're going to be able to recover the cost of their homes, fights between the homeowners' wind policies and flood insurance, and whether they're going to be able to get the revenue back from business interruption. So I think it's very
quickly, gentlemen. You're in Shreveport, Mr. Edwards. Mr. Jones, you're in Houston, and Mr. Smith, you are in, I believe, Colorado. Will all of you go back and practice law in southern Louisiana and New Orleans?
Absolutely. This is Randy Smith here. We got a temporary office in Lafayette and in Covington, and we can't wait to get back into New Orleans.
Mr. Jones, same for you.
We're in Houston and planning every day to go back.
And Mr. Edwards?
Yes, we're dedicated to rebuilding the Gulf South and New Orleans, and we will be there to protect our extended family, many of whom are now completely homeless, and their husbands have no jobs as well. And they will not be alone, I can assure you. I will be back there, and I will protect our family.
Lanny Edwards, Gladstone Jones III, and Randall Smith, thank you.